The New Orleans Saints bring back veteran wide receiver Brandin Cooks, but in the process, it feels like they gave him way too much money. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, New Orleans Saints reunite with veteran wide receiver Brandin Cooks. We'll dive into why the Saints shouldn't be finished at the position, why the New Orleans Saints might have overpaid for the player, and what Brandin Cooks' role will be here in New Orleans. We got all that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen and being it every day, or here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. New Orleans Saints reunite with wide receiver Brandin Cooks. This is something that we kind of expected could be the case. The Saints were clearly in pursuit of a veteran wide receiver to add to their otherwise very young wide receiver room for the most part. They've been playing sort of the ideals of familiarity all over again here in 2025, yet again. And so we're seeing a lot of reunions, guys coming back, all these other things. Brandin Cooks always felt like he was one of those veteran wide receivers that the Saints could potentially go after. Before we get into why the Saints shouldn't be done at the wide receiver position, I want to focus on what Brandin Cooks, the role that he serves here in New Orleans, what it is that he contributes to the team, and why the Saints might have overpaid for this role. Here's the reality of the situation, and nothing that I'm about to say has anything to do with what I think of Brandin Cooks. Brandin Cooks is still a talented wide receiver. He's going to be a veteran leader in this room, but the fact of the matter is that at best, he's your third wide receiver in this offense behind Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. That's just the truth of the situation. Unless the Saints expect to massively change Rashid Shaheed's role in 2025, or there's some mystery and uncertainty around Chris Olave, who started to work his way back last season, but never made his way back out onto the field. We never expected him to get out onto the field after those scary concussions, things like that. But barring anything unforeseen when it comes to Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, at best, Brandin Cooks is your third best wide receiver. And that's okay. His role is perfect for New Orleans, who I was told the Saints were looking for a wide receiver that possessed, quote, an elite trait by a source. And that is something that Brandin Cooks does indeed bring in his speed. I get it. He's 30 plus years old. I get it. He didn't have a great year in 2020. For all of those things are true. And it's why I think the Saints overpaid in terms of what this contract is. However, he still packs the elite trait, which is what they wanted, which is speed. But it feels a little, and I'm going to use the word redundant, but I don't actually mean it in a negative way. But it does feel a little redundant. Brandin Cooks, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, each of them calling cards of speed bars. And so when you look at where Brandin Cooks fits in, I think one of the best things that Brandin Cooks is going to bring to New Orleans is the ability to be able to look at guys like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and say, hey, here's how you make this work. Hey, here's how you try this. Here's how to sell this route a little bit, differently because of your speed so that you can take advantage when you throttle down. Or here's how to, convince somebody that you are throttling down so you can kick it into the next gear with your speed and create separation. I do think that Brandin Cooks will have a major impact on this New Orleans Saints wide receiver room, even if it doesn't come in the form of the stats that he's producing, but instead comes in the things that he gives to Chris Olave, to Rashid Shaheed, knowledge of the game-wise that increase their stats and productivity in Kellen Moore's offense in 2025. That, to me, is the biggest thing that Brandin Cooks can and will contribute to the New Orleans Saints here in 2025 and potentially 2026. It's a 2-year, $13 million deal. Now, while we don't know what the actual structure of the deal is yet, i.e. signing bonus, guaranteed money, what's the base salary of the first year versus the second year, are there void years, all these other pieces, we don't know those details yet. But if things average out to being $6.5 million per year, I dare say that the Saints overpaid a little bit on getting Brandin Cooks here to New Orleans, especially when it comes to something that's a reunion, a guy that should be more than happy to return here to New Orleans, that has the opportunity to return to a team that has this bright, young offensive mind, all those other pieces. You feel like the Saints maybe have a little bit more of the sell here when it comes to Brandin Cooks, whose market, I don't know if it was super robust. We'll find out when we speak to him, because that question will certainly be asked. But again, the amount of money that a team gives a player, when you say that a team overpaid for a player, that's got everything to do with the team, nothing to do with the player. The player and their management team and their representatives and all those other things, they should be advocating for the most money possible for their players. So now that we're done talking about what Brandin Cooks' role might look like in New Orleans, and look, there's also the ability for him to be able to step in and contribute should there be more injuries at the position without you losing speed on the perimeter and without you having to turn to the youngest guys on your roster on the perimeter as well, should that happen. So there's value in what he provides in terms of depth, moving up, moving around, all of those other things as well. I want to be very clear about that. So I do think that Brandin Cooks will have a role and will have an impact for the New Orleans Saints here in 2025, because I'm not confident that the players are going to be able to stay completely healthy for 17 games. And I'm not confident that if they do, Brandin Cooks is anything more than a third wide receiver in the system. Outside of that, you're fine with all of the veteran things that he gives them, how he improves and impacts guys like Chris Olave, Rashid, Shaheed, all of that. But the reason why I think that the Saints overpaid on this is $6.5 million per year. Now, we'll see what happens, like I said, when we get the actual contract details. What's the structure? What's the guaranteed money? All those other things. But a 2-year, $13 million deal feels like a lot for a player that's effectively going to be your third wide receiver at best, assuming that the top two guys stay healthy, and could potentially end up being the fourth option if you continue to invest in this wide receiver class, whether that be via free agency or via the NFL draft. And so for me, $6.5 million average per year feels like a little bit of an overspend, especially when projected contracts are expected to be $3 million per year. Not that anybody negotiates contracts off of what Pro Football Focus thinks contracts are going to look like, but that was certainly what the market felt like it was going to be, especially when you talk about a wide receiver in Brandin Cooks last year, who had 26 receptions in his age 31 season, 259 yards, an average of 10 yards per reception, and then 3 receiving touchdowns, appeared in 10 games, 9 of which was he a starter. And that's down from a year ago with Dallas, where he appeared in 16 games, came up with just 54 catches for 657 yards, but did contribute 8 receiving touchdowns as well. To his credit, almost all of those stats would have been number one for the New Orleans Saints at the position last year because of the number of injuries that the team withstood at the position. So I think it was a little bit of an overpay, but you had the money to do it. You wanted a veteran receiver. You want somebody to come in and provide some leadership. Brandin Cooks can absolutely do that. And cool story, you get him back, number 10 still available. He can literally go back to his old uniform if he wants to. There is some nice stuff to all this, but I do think that the team might have given up a little bit more than they necessarily needed to help man this position for what it is that they want, and especially in a situation like this where they do get the elite trait that they wanted in speed. But I don't feel like they're done at the wide receiver position, or at least they shouldn't think they are. Let me explain why. As we continue on, rather. They won't, I will. As we continue on today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you everything you need to get in on the action all tournament long. Right now, new customers will get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Win your first $5 bet, get $200 in bonus bets, and you can then place more bets on things like, buzzer beaters and Cinderella stories, and even who's going to be cutting down the net. You can find it all over at FanDuel.com. My advice, take your first $5, put it down on a heavy favorite tonight. The LSU women are heavy favorites over San Diego State by so much, 25.5 points, that if you put $5 down on the money line, you can't even submit the bet because you'll win less than a penny. That's how much favorites they are when it comes to the LSU women. So go over to Duke versus Oregon. Duke 14.5 favorites. Put $5 down on that one. You'll win like 28 cents if they win. But if it's your first $5 bet, you'll get those $200 in bonus bets. So visit FanDuel.com today and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Let's Get it, Who Dat Nation? I might have the unpopular opinion here that the Saints might have overspent a little bit in signing Brandin Cooks, but I do like the signing of Brandin Cooks because of what it is that he will bring to this team as a veteran leader, all those other things. I just don't know if the money was appropriate. However, the Saints should not consider themselves finished at this position, even if they do get that veteran leadership, even if they do get that elite trait of speed that they were looking for in this offense. I still think that this New Orleans Saints wide receiver room can use and is in need of, to say it even more clearly, a big-bodied, physical chain mover, go-to X receiver at wideout. I don't think you're going to get that from from Brandin Cooks to add to Chris Olave, to add to Rashid Shaheed. Brandin Cooks could give you a solid slot option, though, which I think is a good thing for New Orleans because I think you like having Chris Olave as well as Rashid Shaheed out on the perimeters there. But I do think that if you have the opportunity to add a 6'2" plus, 6'3", big body, 200 plus pound wide receiver to be the physical dominator for you, I think there's value in doing that. And there are still a ton of options available and a ton of ways that the Saints can get that done. In free agency alone, 2 guys, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, both of which fit the mold of what it is that you're looking for, bring you more veteran leadership at the position. They're in complement to guys like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, as opposed to being redundant or almost potentially a replacement for Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, which the team has no interest in finding. They want guys that are going to be adding to what it is that Olave and Shaheed bring. They're not interested in trading these guys, from my understanding. And so you go out there and you get the guys that complement those players, or you get the guys that can help those players develop. Brandin Cooks will help those players develop. Now go and get the guy that can complement those players. And that's where a guy like Keenan Allen, who's a bigger body, sure, has dealt with injuries, things like that, but you're looking for somebody to come and help you out in 2025. That's what you're looking for. And so can you show up? Can you use your familiarity with Kellen Moore to come in and end up having some success here in 2025? I think you can find that. Amari Cooper, same thing. Familiarity with Kellen Moore, an opportunity to come in and just be somebody that can run those X receiver routes, be the in-breaking route guy for you, play close to the line of scrimmage, potentially get involved a little bit deep as well. Certainly could find your way into that. Amari Cooper, former Raider, has some familiarity not just with Kellen Moore, but has familiarity with Derek Carr as well during his time. And so I do think that there's a potential, or there would be good kind of, I don't know the word I'm looking for here, but like it would make sense. You know what I mean? Good symmetry. That's the word I was looking for. Good symmetry there all around, assuming that Derek Carr will indeed be the quarterback in 2025, which is what the assumption is, at least at this point, and everything still, especially after the restructure, all those other things, no trade clause, yada, yada. So like those 2 guys make sense in veteran free agency. You can go to a Tyler Boyd as well, a guy that I advocated for last season that, didn't end up working out, but is there a chance that he could potentially be somebody that could be another one of those big-bodied guys here in 2025. Let's go beyond free agency because it's not limited to free agency. Tetairoa McMillan at 9 should still very much be considered a possibility. Yes, they added Brandin Cooks, but Brandin Cooks and Tetairoa McMillan, vastly different wide receivers, to say the least. And so being able to add a 6'4", 210 plus pound, 200 plus pound wide receiver that moves well, that is a fantastic route runner, that can contribute as a run blocker, and that can be the guy that is just simply stronger and better than any cornerback, mentality-wise or physicality-wise, that lines up across from him. There's value in having that mentality, right? I've had a lot of people ask me, should the New Orleans Saints, try to reunite with Michael Thomas? I'm afraid that ship has sailed, and it seems that no team in the NFL seems to be in a hurry to sign Michael Thomas, at least at this point, or Michael Thomas isn't in a hurry to be signed by any team. This goes both ways. So why not go and find somebody that's young, that you can bring in, and that has a similar type of demeanor, a similar type of mentality, and that comes in on a rookie contract? Okay, maybe it's not Tetairoa McMillan at 9. Maybe he goes off the board to the New York Giants or the Carolina Panthers, who are still looking for somebody. It feels like defensive line is the way the Carolina Panthers are going, but they're still looking for somebody to catch the football over in Carolina. And so then you turn your attention to the second round. Guys like Alec Ayumanor coming out of Stanford, who not only is a fantastic route runner, but is one of the best run blockers that's a non-offensive line run blocker in this draft class outside of probably Ohio State running back Travion Henderson, who I would love to be a second-round pick for the New Orleans Saints, for instance. But a guy like Ayumanor, absolutely somebody that can come in and have that kind of an impact for you. Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, a day 2 guy, big body, good receiver, good 50-50 ball guy, and has some yards after catch ability even at his size as well when he gets into the open field. Makes a lot of sense. How about an underrated guy, like a guy like Nick Nash, later on a day 3 type of receiver that could be somebody that comes in that measures well, that tests well, that ends up having a ton of production as well that he brings to wherever it is that drafts him. Coming out of San Jose State, comes in having played in 12 games last year. That's his passing stats. I keep forgetting that he's also like throwing passes and stuff like that too. But 104 catches, 1,382 receiving yards, and 16 receiving touchdowns last year. And he measures in at just over 6 foot, a little bit lighter than 200 pounds, but I'm always curious about what guys train at versus what guys play at, right? So always a little bit different weight-wise. And so the Saints have every bit of opportunity to continue to add to this wide receiver room, and they should take it. Yes, they have Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and now Brandin Cooks, and you've got Cedric Wilson on a rework deal. You've brought back Dante Pettis. You have Bub Means, who didn't get the opportunity to show much during his rookie year. I'm sure he is chomping at the bit to be able to show what he can do here in year 2. And I think that he can still be a very good receiver as well. And there's other young guys that are going to be around too. But for the Saints, I think if you get the opportunity to grab a top-end talent at the position that fits the big-bodied mold, you should absolutely do it. Signing Brandin Cooks, I think, is a good signing, even though I'm not a fan of the contract in its bare terms. But despite the fact that I like the signing, it doesn't mean that I think the New Orleans Saints should consider themselves done at that position just yet. So that's where I sit. I still think the Saints should be looking to invest in a big-bodied, veteran or young, physical wide receiver that can be that typical, quintessential X wideout that complements Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and now Brandin Cooks. Hopefully, rising tide to raise all of those ships. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, we're going to dive deeper into what it is that the New Orleans Saints are trying to do on offense, because not a lot has changed over on that side of the football. So what do we think is the thing that the New Orleans Saints will be able to do with the changes that they've made coaching staff-wise in 2025 that might actually improve where the offense is? And it all comes down to play calling. We'll break all that down in tomorrow's episode. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me in the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else or on your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.